You're standing by a train track and a runaway train is heading towards 5 people. You are standing next to a supercomputer that can stop the train with butter, but you need to calculate how much butter it would take to stop the train. To stop the train, we need to overcome its momentum and kinetic energy. Here's what we're working with. The mass of the train, a typical freight train, weighs around 10,000 metric tons or 10 million kilograms, and let's assume it's traveling at 80 kilometers or 22.2 meters. Using the kinetic energy formula, which is, putting in the numbers, that would be equal to, that's 2.46 billion joules of energy to dissipate. That's enough to power about 20,100 watt light bulbs for an hour. Here, butter's main superpower is its slickness. When applied to surfaces, it drastically reduces friction, the force that typically slows down a moving object, but butter has a very low friction coefficient of about 0.04 on steel. Compare that to dry steel-on-steel friction, which is around 0.6. So, the idea is to slather the train's tracks with butter, reducing friction to the point where the wheels spin uselessly, allowing us to steal the train's forward motion. But how much butter do we need? Well, a thick, consistent layer of butter is essential, but let's assume we need a layer that's about 1 centimeter thick to provide sufficient slickness. Now let's consider the track length. The distance required to stop a train depends on its weight, speed, and the level of friction. On standard steel tracks with brakes applied, it can take up to 1.5 kilometers to stop. With butter drastically reducing friction, the stopping distance could extend to 50 kilometers or more, as the train essentially slides to a halt. Since train tracks are about 1.4 meters wide, so for 50 kilometers of track, the total area to butter up would be equal to 70,000 m2, to cover 70,000 square meters with a 1 centimeter or 0.01 meters thick layer of butter. So how many sticks of butter would be enough? A standard stick of butter is 113 grams and has a volume of about 118 milliliters. That's nearly 6 million sticks of butter. Well, just in case, how much would it cost? Assuming each stick of butter costs $2, so equal to $12 million. That's an expensive train stop, and it doesn't even include labor costs for applying the butter. But could it work? Theoretically, yes. A sufficiently thick layer of butter could reduce friction to the point where the train slows down and eventually stops. So just in case next time you have to stop a train with butter, you know just exactly how much butter you need, theoretically. But in reality, it's a slippery slope, literally. It's much easier and safer to rely on good old-fashioned brakes. Save the butter for your toast.